We arrived in Chicago, the third largest metropolis in the USA, to tell and show you why it's even easier to start your American life here than in New York.
Let's figure out how it happened that a city, which can often be seen on lists of the most dangerous cities in the country, has also been recognized as the best city to live in the USA for 6 consecutive years.
Let's go. We really love the city, and in this episode, we will try to convey its unique atmosphere to you. That is why we want to start from downtown.
And since Chicago is the birthplace of the world's first skyscraper, namely the Farm Insurance Building, it is not surprising that there are so many here. By the way, in terms of the number of skyscrapers, only New York surpasses Chicago.
And it's no wonder that Chicago is considered the architectural capital of the USA. Just look at how many different skyscrapers there are here, of various styles, eras, and types. There is even a prison skyscraper in downtown Chicago that has 28 floors.
And of course, the architecture of the city includes not only high-rise buildings, but also residential areas or, for example, drawbridges. And what's most interesting is that there are more of them here than in St. Petersburg. Here, there are as many as 37 of them.
Moreover, this architecture is very much loved to be blown up in cinema.
Of course, Chicago often appears in various films, and even Christopher Nolan decided to shoot The Dark Knight specifically in Chicago because it resembles Gotham more than New York.
Remember the scene from the movie when the Joker blows up the hospital? Well, they actually blew it up in Chicago for the film. More precisely, they found a building that was scheduled for demolition and suggested blowing it up.
You would do anything for the sake of art?
Speaking of art, one cannot overlook the cultural life in Chicago. It is a topic that one could talk about forever. There are many galleries, exhibitions, museums, and opera, all created with a unique style and architecture. In fact, it was here that we attended the Broadway show Queens in this building. Overall, Chicago is an ideal city to immerse oneself in American culture and atmosphere, as there are not as many immigrants here as there are, for example, in New York. Speaking of immigrants, there are many Irish and many Italians here, which makes the cuisine simply exquisite and incredible, as there are many restaurants accordingly. The Irish here also celebrate their holiday, St. Patrick's Day. They dye this river a bright, toxic green. It is said to be incredible. It even looks simply stunningly beautiful in pictures.
While we were walking along the Chicago River, we met a local writer who was born and has lived here her whole life, and we interview her.
It's a wonderful city.
Yeah,
There's nothing, I honestly think that everybody should come to Chicago at least once.
Yeah,
you know?
that's true.
Just experience it. Not everybody's as friendly as me.
That's true.
But, you know, like the River Walk, the Millennium Park, all the neighborhoods. You go down Clark Street, go north on Clark, amazing. Go south on Clark, amazing. Real neighborhoods with real people.
Oh, okay.
Restaurants, bars, shops.
Yeah, we should check it out.
We should check it out. Yeah, definitely.
Thank you. In general, while walking around Chicago, you notice a large number of pleasant public spaces where you want to spend time. And no matter which neighborhood you visit, they are everywhere.
I also want to add that it's so cool that in such a megacity with towering giant skyscrapers, there are flower beds nearby where you can spend time with family, have a picnic, and see a huge number of children. There's a playground, and on every street, you can find bicycles available for rent to ride along the bike paths. Well, in general, it's really great that there is such a balance between urban life and harmony with nature.
In fact, Central Park in Chicago is just as good as Central Park in New York. It has a beautiful view of the skyscrapers, a cozy atmosphere, lots of people walking around, cafes, and everything is really great. In New York, there is a large lake in the middle of the park, while here the park is connected to the lake. On one side is downtown, and on the other side is a large lake. Continuing our walk through Chicago, stumbled upon not just a fire station, but a piece of art that probably once again shows us that Chicago is truly the architectural capital of the United States. By the way, this reminds me of our video about Austin. There, we also showed you the fire station because it was designed according to the city's design code. It looked really cool. If you haven't seen it, be sure to check it out. By the way, this is where Route 66 begins in Chicago, stretching all the way to Santa Monica Pier in Los Angeles.
And we even traveled along it, though in the opposite direction, and such a route took a week by car.
And now we have just reached the area where our friend Kristina lives. And the first question, Kristina, why did you choose Chicago to live in? You have lived in Florida, California, and New York. Why this city?
Despite living around car dealerships, I do not drive. Chicago is a walkable city. As you can see, we walk calmly, yes, on the sidewalk, all that. This was very important to me. Secondly, the housing is quite affordable. If we compare prices with other American metropolises, housing in Chicago is very budget-friendly. In my opinion, well, in some new cool complexes with pools, gyms, and other amenities. An average American can generally afford to live there. Chicago is an incredibly beautiful city. Indeed, here you enter, walk around, get inspired, and recharge. It is also important for me to have 4 seasons, for the seasons to change, because I lived by the ocean for a year in South Carolina in the warm. Honestly, I got a little tired of it. In general, we have reached the building where I live.
This is what the apartment I live in looks like. This studio is small but very cozy, and I really like it here. Well, I have something here. It reminds me a bit of the Moscow style of apartments, especially the kitchen and bathroom, as if I had these flashbacks to home.
Yes, there's a wardrobe. What's the studio cost?
This studio costs $1,750 plus. I pay $30 to $50 for utilities. By the way, I forgot to mention that I don't live alone, but with a man. The area where I live is the Gold Coast. It is considered somewhat of a fancy neighborhood because there are a lot of shops and various brand name car dealerships here.
I saw Aston Martin and BMW here.
Therefore, housing prices are slightly above average, so this studio could be a little cheaper. Still, I believe it is a very affordable price. Districto is quiet. I really like it here. It's very calm, with a lot of restaurants and very nice people walking around. So it's worth every penny, 100%. We also have a rooftop like this. We often gather here with friends, drink some wine, and chat. I really love spending time here.
Speaking of friends, how do you think Chicago is as a city to start? I mean, what are your friends doing?
I believe that Chicago is almost the ideal city to start in because, as I mentioned, the housing here is quite affordable, and even if you work, for example, in somewhere where no special qualifications are needed, you earn enough to maintain a good standard of living. My friends are engaged in completely different things. Some work in restaurants and bars as waiters and bartenders, while others work in the kitchen. It's also really cool to develop any kind of business in Chicago. There is also a lot of cash work, meaning informal work without documents, again because there are many businesses in our community and it's easier to hire people who have just arrived and are ready to work. So I believe that Chicago is an ideal city to start out in.
Chris, it's also very interesting to know about expenses. Can you please share your living expenses in the city?
For food, I would say I have started cooking at home more often. I spend about $150 a week on groceries, but I buy good, really good products, like Whole Foods and all that. It's clear that you can spend a bit less if you want, depending on what you eat. The phone bill is about $60 a month. Well, there are some extra things, like cosmetics and clothing. Well, in general, I would say that on average, I spend about maybe 2.5 to 3,000, and I try to save the rest for the studio because some investments are needed there. I am able to save. I don't deny myself anything. I live life to the fullest. As for transportation, I mostly get around on foot, which means I spend very little money on transportation overall. Most often, it's either a taxi, which costs an average of $10 to $15 per ride, but I take a taxi maybe twice a week. Also, public transportation is very well developed in Chicago. I can sometimes take the bus or the subway, maybe once a week. By the way, we are passing the entrance to the subway. Let's take a ride and see what the subway looks like in Chicago. The metro in Chicago is much better. It is much cleaner, quieter, and there are almost no homeless people. It's not as hot here, and it doesn't smell, because in New York, of course, it's like that. It's not the best metro in the world. In Chicago, it's very comfortable and very calm.
Is it really extensive? How far can you go?
It's quite far, but you can go straight to the airport. It's calm, without transfers. I really like the part of the metro. That is above ground, which goes through downtown and over the meadow. The views there are just stunning.
Because of these kinds of openings between buildings, Chicago is much cleaner than New York. Those who have been to New York know that restaurants simply take their trash in garbage bags and put it out in front of their establishment, where it sits, rotting, stinking, and spoiling the impression of the city. In Los Angeles, the impression can be spoiled by the tent of a homeless person standing right in the center. In Chicago, however, there is neither of those.
We arrived at one of the largest lakes in the U.S., Michigan. If you look out, you can see neither the beginning nor the end. It looks like the sea. And notice how many people are sunbathing, swimming, boating, jet skiing, or doing whatever they want here. There are many different kinds of activities, and people are playing volleyball. Right now, there are more people than usual because of the holiday, July 4th, but overall. Recently, my friend and I came here at 6 in the morning, and everyone's running, swimming, playing volleyball.
How difficult is it to winter in Chicago? It seems to me that many associate it with being a very cold city, which scares everyone.
Honestly, I didn't get the joke at all because I'm from Siberia, and when I moved here, everyone stared me with stories of very cold winters in Chicago. To give you an idea, this February we had several days with temperatures reaching plus 20. Plus 20, everything that is not worse than in Siberia isn't scary, but here the winter is quite comfortable actually. There are periods, a few days, when it can be minus 30, but it's okay. The rest of the time, the weather is quite comfortable.
The second fear that people have related to Chicago is crime.
Of course, there are areas, again, that you shouldn't go into. But I live in downtown, and I always walk in the evenings and at night. Everything is fine, no problems. I have never had any situations. We have what you might call the southern part of the city, where all of this is concentrated. It's a hub of crime, so it's definitely better not to go there. Downtown is very safe, very safe. Recently, a friend of mine from California came to visit, and he goes and asks, "Excuse me, where are all the homeless people?" And I said, well, we don't have them in Chicago. Well, almost, but that's really true.
One of the hobbies of people in Chicago is to hang out on boats like this. Some even arrange them in rows to make it easier to move between them and throw huge parties. And as you can understand, Chicagoans do not suffer at all from the lack of an ocean here, as Lake Michigan perfectly replaces it. Therefore, there is an incredible number of yachts here. We arrived at the lake, rustled the cookie packaging, and the reaction of the locals was immediate. Guys, I have dreamed for a long time of feeding raccoons in Chicago, ever since our last trip. Our students told us that we could come to this spot and feed them. It's just so cute. I love raccoons. There are a lot of them in the USA, especially in California, and I see them all the time. Some people find them annoying because they seem to get into trash cans. Here, but they are very cute. By the way, the vegetables and nuts were ignored by the raccoons as long as cookies were available. One raccoon even couldn't resist and grabbed 4 pieces at once. I hope his life turned out well. The cookies were, by the way, sugar-free. While we were feeding the raccoons, it attracted the attention of passing Americans, and I invited them to join us. They happily did. By the way, I remember the last time we came to Chicago. It was winter, and you had that apartment with panoramic windows.
Yes, I really missed that apartment. It was a nice apartment. It was very large. It had such a panoramic view. By the way, my friend also lives right in the center of downtown. He has an amazing view. Suggest we go for a walk.
Sasha, you have an incredibly beautiful apartment, and it's so cool that it has a view of all of Chicago, allowing you to see its buildings. Please share, how much does such an apartment cost per month?
This apartment costs $20.50, and I believe that this is a very good price for Dondan because building is a bit older, and in this price range, you can find something.
It's a 1-bedroom. In what floor?
38th.
Wow, cool. Can you please tell me what job I need to have to afford such an apartment?
When I moved here, I worked in IT for about 8 years in America. Then I was laid off, and now I work in a restaurant. Well, accordingly, my income has dropped a little, but nevertheless, I can still manage to stay here and live.
If it's not a secret, could you please tell me what your experience was like when you worked in IT and what it is now in the restaurant?
Yes, but in IT I earned about $10,000 a month now. It's half as much, around $5,000. And it really depends on what your expenses are, any additional bills, payments, and so on. With my salary, in general, it's quite possible to live, well, normally, let's say, pending again.
I just wanted to ask that $5,000 a month is the average salary. Generally, when I talk to someone who speaks Russian, everyone has a salary around that amount. And sometimes in the comments, people write to me about how one can live on such money. Please share. You already said that this is quite a decent level. When you choose something, do you have to cut back, save, and pick products on sale at the store, or do you still choose what you want to choose?
Well, a little I have. Small level of expenses that I just can't eliminate. So some of my money goes there. And because of this, I have to manage my money more. Wisely stick to a budget. Overall, when your income is at one level and then it drops to half, of course, you get used to a different level. And now I strive to grow my income back to that level and possibly even higher. But right now, I am at a level where I am succeeding. It might be a little bit more constrained in some areas, maybe with a slightly different approach, but nonetheless, I don't need to go out. For the most part, I'm doing what I did before.
Sasha, it's also important to shed light on the fact that a large portion of the salary in the USA often goes to taxes. So, out of $5,000, how much does tax take from you?
In general, I was talking about the $5,000 already after taxes. So I currently have $5,000 net, and 10 was also already after taxes.
And if it's about taxes, what tax do you pay, and what do you have left again?
So before I had a higher salary, and I think I paid about 35% in taxes, maybe something like that, and not very knowledgeable about it. Now, since my overall income is lower, I fall into a different category and a lower percentage is charged. I mean, I'm not a tax expert, just speaking in general terms.
Sasha, tell me how long living in Chicago?
12 years.
Listen, it's interesting. 12 years. It turns out you had an experience. Right? Still, well, it's different, of course, after so many years. How do you think it was to start back then? And how easy is it to start now? You also have friends who are moving, right? They moved recently. What could you say about this question based on your experience?
Again, it seems to depend a lot on mindset and what a person is focused on and ready for. What's good about Chicago is that real estate and rental prices are much lower than in other major cities. I don't know. I just feel like everything. I guess I'm a lucky person. I just come across some opportunities, people, I don't know, coincidences. And it worked out for me. I can't say that I, started off from some high point. I also needed to gradually build up my standard of living and so on. Chicago, first of all, is a very beautiful city. It inspires just by being itself, because you come out here, look at all of this, and it feels great. You want to stay here. And people, when they come, often talk about how wonderful it is here. But it wasn't like I just walked in there. I mean, I had difficulties everywhere. So I think my start was realistic.
I would probably describe it more as if it were easy, because, without a doubt, a liter of tears was shed there and so on. But if I look back from a higher perspective now, there wasn't a problem that couldn't be overcome, and it was overcome quite quickly. There was always someone to help, and solutions were found, so it definitely wasn't worth those tears and those worries. So yes, it's very interesting.
We have a swimming pool, gym, sauna, billiards, and cinema in the building, and all of this is included in the price.
Wow, and it's so budget-friendly and incredibly cool to live in a metropolis in a skyscraper and have access to the same pool where you can just relax. It's amazing. In general, such complexes are located throughout America, but if you compare prices with other big cities, as we discussed, it will definitely be much more expensive there.
Now that we have learned about the salaries and expenses of the guys in Chicago, let's take a statistical look at the ratio of salaries to prices.
Chicago is doing great in this regard. The average salary here is enough for 2.2 months of living in the city, which is the best indicator in the entire country. And that's why we ranked it first on the list of the best cities to live in 2024. If you haven't seen this video, be sure to check it out to find out who it was competing against.
As you understood, salaries in Chicago are comparable to those in New York, but the expenses here are much lower. After all, apartments with a beautiful view here can be rented for $2,500, while in New York, they would definitely cost about twice as much. We were interested in showing you the housing of Julia and Yaroslav, as they have just arrived, and you will be able to understand what you can expect at the start.
Guys, we just arrived in Deck Place. It's a suburb of Chicago. It's located 30 minutes away from downtown, and now we will see where we live. By the way, we have a courtyard with our own barbecue. We rented a one-bedroom. It is a private sector, a gated community. Here, prices start from $1,600 and above. Ours costs $1,600 per month. That's all we managed to acquire.
Cool. We didn't even have a table with chairs in our first apartment at all. There was a bar counter, and the guys brought us bar stools from the moving.
Yes, here we have the living room. We want to create a separate area and hang or place a large television here. Here we have the very bedroom. Don't mind the mess. Everything is like this for now. All we managed to take is the mattress and the box spring. And here is the kitchen area. The only downside here is that the laundry is downstairs.
In the apartment.
Yes, they do not allow installing a washing machine here, although there is a dishwasher, and laundry costs $1.75, so there is only a built-in kitchen set and a refrigerator.
Did you buy all the furniture, the table, and the sofa yourself?
We made it ourselves. All the furniture, we made it ourselves.
Did you buy something from Facebook, or did your neighbors help you?
The videos were found on Facebook, on the marketplace. Some are cheaper, some a bit more expensive, and some even for free. By the way, one of these sofas is free. Very cool, and it's new. The table in the living room is ancient. It's massive, made of such strong wood, but it's a bit worn. We actually got it for free along with the chairs.
Here, we really have the opportunity to communicate and seek help, and in case of a fire, come and take care of it.
You might be wondering why you can get furniture, or even items like a television for free here. The fact is that Americans move very often, and on average, an American moves 11 times in their lifetime because they typically find a job and relocate closer to that job. It could even be another state. Accordingly, the furniture they do not take with them is often cheaper to replace entirely than, for example, to transport it using a moving company, so they either sell it all very cheaply or even give it away for free. Who are your neighbors? Please share.
Guys, there is a whole community of people from Kyrgyzstan here. They are great folks who always help with advice and can even assist with furniture if you need something.
By the way, this house belongs to the Gallaghers from the show Shameless. It is located in a not very safe area, so you can now see firsthand what one of these neighborhoods looks like. Well, guys, here we are at the Gallaghers' house. The neighborhood is, of course, not great. I didn't even want to walk around here during the day, but it's cool to be here and see that very house.
And can you imagine, Fiona was sitting at this gate, on this porch, thinking about what to do next with her life.
By the way, the homeowners charge $5 for you to step onto the porch and actually look inside the house.
So, we opened our favorite citizen app, which shows crimes in the area. And in the last day, there were as many as 15 reports. Here we can see in the area that there is a report about armed individuals. There's also a report about a threat with a weapon not far from us. So basically, I want to get out of here quickly. Do you want to add something? Yeah, let's hurry up.
The neighborhood is not great, but as you can see, the cars are more or less okay. It's not like it's completely poor here, but many have fences like this.
Yeah, the distant sound of sirens is a bit unsettling, but it's good that there's police around. It calms me down a little. By the way, there are some really positive people here. So we just came here to take some pictures of the house from Shameless.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And we heard a lot that this area is kind of like unsafe and it can be dangerous here. What can you tell about it?
Dangerous? I never had any problems over here. Maybe when I first moved in, I heard some things going on, but that was a while ago.
Okay. That's a relief. Thank you so much.
But as far as, I hear about murders and stuff like that, but I don't see it, you know. I think it's only when you're into something.
Okay,
when you get into something, it's best to stay out of things, you know, and just live your life.
Yeah.
You know, don't get into drug dealing.
Yeah.
We keep them out, and the police station is right there. They keep them out too. So,
that's important. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Oh,
we appreciate it a
don't
lot.
worry about
it was very
It's
beneficial. Thank you.
All right, it's okay.
American cinema is often criticized for its pretty pictures and rose-colored glasses. I wouldn't say that America really tries to show itself as some very beautiful, very neat place. In my opinion, they most often just show real life. Shameless is just the reality of poor people, in this case, in Chicago. And that's why It's worth watching this series. It's really very cool. It's a kind of comedy, but there's actually a lot of drama. When I lived in Russia, it helped me a lot. I really dreamed of going to America, but it helped me take off those rose-colored glasses and understand that there are very bad and dangerous neighborhoods in America where life is really tough. I highly recommend it, especially if you're planning to check out Chicago. If you pay attention to the population in those areas, you'll notice that the majority are African Americans, and they earn much less than the average in America, and it seems like nothing new. But what? If I told you that a Nigerian who emigrates to America earns, on average, more than a regular American? Surprising, right? A person who has no connections, who wasn't born in this country, who doesn't have citizenship, earns more than the people who grew up here. The thing is, in the 1950s, the GDP per capita in the US was already the highest in the world, but at the same time, there was still segregation in the states. After the abolition of segregation in the 1960s, the US government decided to help its poor population and even declared a war on poverty. And that's when welfare came about, a federal system that was supposed to help all people in the US who needed assistance. And it was then that benefits were started for single mothers. In fact, that's where all the problems began. Of course, such anti-poverty programs sound very noble and seem necessary in theory. But in reality, they create huge problems, as it is impossible to predict the consequences of such decisions. In this case, the introduction of the program to support single mothers contributed to African Americans not starting families, meaning families began to break apart. To receive these very benefits, if the divorce rate among African Americans in the 60s was 5%, meaning African Americans were very hardworking, religious, thus very family-oriented, it has now increased to 80% in the 21st century. Just imagine how destructive this law is for families, for children, and for how children grow up, because they are raised in a household where they only have their mother, meaning the father is often absent, and this mother is on welfare, not working anywhere. She cannot provide a good education because in America, all neighborhoods and schools are tied to local areas, and schools are funded by the taxes of that area. So, the more people pay in taxes there, the more money goes to the schools. And imagine how money can flow into schools when the entire population of a neighborhood is on welfare. And it was then, but these projects began to form in the USA, and social housing started to be built. Before that, there had never been anything like this in the USA. America has always been a very capitalist country, where there was little regulation and no government intervention in the market. But, gradually, such programs were created, and they increasingly led to such unfortunate consequences. And this is just one example. And now, of course, all of this leads to a huge problem with crime. Even when there was segregation, even when African Americans were very, very poor, it didn't lead to crime. 80% of crimes occur specifically in these areas. And when you look at the statistics, in Chicago or New York, statistically speaking, these are considered dangerous places. But if you look at the breakdown of where crime occurs, 80% will be concentrated in one place, and only 20% are scattered throughout the city. So, obviously, you just shouldn't go into that area, and most likely, everything will be fine. And again, you really have no reason to go to those places, right? I mean, nothing happens there. There are no tourist attractions. It's just social housing where very poor people live, who are simply lacking motivation because the government constantly supports them with benefits. So, that's the problem, and it needs to be addressed. Many people say that this system needs to be abolished. But, of course, it's very difficult to abolish it because you'll be immediately accused of racism. Because you would stop giving benefits to millions of people, and it also sounds very immoral, as it means single mothers won't receive money anymore. That's the moral dilemma facing American society. We were filming over there, in front of the house, and some guys drove up to us and asked if we had permission to film here, warning us that it's better not to just hang out here. There could be problems. So, the neighborhood is probably not the safest, even though that guy was trying to calm us down, saying that everything here is chill.
When talking about Chicago, you can't help but mention Chicago pizza. It's not made with the thin crust and edges like New York pizza, but rather more like a pie. That's why it's called deep dish pizza, because of its depth. There are many places throughout Chicago where you can try it, but the most famous is the Jordan's chain. The first association when you hear about Chicago is always gangsters and jazz. That's why we couldn't miss the jazz bar that Al Capone once turned into a speakeasy where he sold alcohol during Prohibition. We visited Alcatraz prison in San Francisco, where Al Capone was held, and now we've also been to the jazz bar where he spent time. So Green Mill has become one of the most famous bars in the US and the most iconic in Illinois due to its close historical ties to gangster culture. In the US, there are many such speakeasies, and some can only be accessed with special code words or through secret codes. But the cool thing about this bar is that it only accepts cash, no cards, and it's designed purely in the style of the 1920s, even featuring vintage cash registers. Unfortunately, we couldn't listen to the music that evening as it was a night of flames, but the atmosphere was still there.
Well, guys, Chicago is just an incredible city, and I really wish each of you could visit here because every time we come, we feel like living here, and maybe one day we will even do that.
It feels like Chicago remains in the shadow of New York, another huge metropolis. But Chicago doesn't fall short in beauty or salaries at all. In other words, people here enjoy life and live at a pretty high level. And if you want to come to Chicago or New York or any other city, we help people from all over the world move to Chicago and 15 other major cities in the UWS. So, if you feel like, if you want to gain experience living in America and improve your English, we would be happy to help you. Our DMs are always open, so don't hesitate to reach out. And in the description below this video, you will find a free guide where you can understand how well the way we and Anton, along with thousands of our subscribers, came to America Suits You. Until we meet again, we hope it will be in America. Bye-bye, everyone.